Jer si milostivi čovekoljubi Bog i tebi slavu uznosimo, Otcu i Sinu i Svetome Duhu, sada i uvek i u vekove vekova.
In a world of shadows and secrets untold, where primeval stories make the brave go cold, mighty gods are high and realms below, whispers of legends that shape each soul. And nightmarish dreams, cryptids lurking, nothing's as it seems, giants walking, angels and demons fight, only truth can bring the light. Through the echoes of time, the tales unfold, mysteries arise as the prophecies are foretold, from valiant knights to buried treasure, this podcast brings nothing but pleasure. Welcome to mysteries and majesty. Study with us and don't be a travesty. Theology, mythology, fantasy and horror, Dungeons and Dragons, Skyrim and Mordor. Phantom powers haunt the evening, in gothic castles where they're screaming. Wizards cast spells in their towers tonight, exploiting enigmas hidden from our sight. Archaeologists make excavations deep of the ancient tombs where pharaohs sleep. In the dust of ages we chronicles keep, storytelling's power of monsters that creep. Mysteries and majesty is the place for you to learn about this haunted space. From scholarship to manuscripts of old, unlock the secrets of wisdom and gold.
Hi, everyone. Welcome from freezing Chicago, even though it's getting a little bit warmer, to our 103rd episode on Myths, Mysteries, and Majesty. I'm happy to welcome back my co-host, Shaun. Shaun, before we start diving into this material, why do you think the topic for tonight when it comes to the seal or the Ring of Solomon is interesting and it's exciting and it's a topic that not just the nerds should be assessing, but also why would it be also interesting when it comes to the Christian perspective?
Well, a lot of it is that it validates some of the claims of some of the intertestamental literature and some of the claims of the post-Christian pseudepigrapha and some of the Greek writings, or not Greek, I'm sorry, the Jewish writings, like Josephus, who actually references the Solomonic ring. There's some development in the understanding of the powers of the ring and in what the Seal of Solomon actually can do, and as late as the 17th century, you have kind of a full-flushed system of esoteric magic happening within both the Christian and the Jewish worlds, and they actually adopt separate symbols for what represents the Ring of Solomon. But the importance of it is that it lends credibility to the idea that these documents that testify to other things outside of the Seal of Solomon are credible, because they're referencing something that now we can say, actually, yes, this was a practice. Yes, we have seen this, and we actually have the artifacts. We know that this is what people were doing.
So is this one ring to rule them all?
No,
maybe to rule the demons.
I don't think it was one ring to rule all the rings, but I do think, as far as the mythology is concerned, it is definitely one ring to rule all of the demons.
Yeah, that's what I was referring. Yeah, so for tonight, we plan to combine different sources, different stories of both when it comes to the seal or the Ring of Solomon, with the Testament of Solomon. And like Shaun was mentioning, we also plan to go to Josephus, because I think his writings came even earlier than the Testament of Solomon. And if you guys stay by the end, we also have an archaeological or two articles, since archaeologists have found this ancient amulet with Solomon's inscription on it that was supposedly used for the protective reason. I think some Christians in the early ages, just before the medieval ages were starting, they were using it supposedly for some superstitious reasons. So we want to combine this esoteric, mythological side a little bit with Old Testament, and then we also want to switch to the archaeology. So this will be a lengthy episode with tons of info, so please stay with us. And also thank you for reaching and going over 1,000 subscribers. So thank you all for that. I hope that's just the beginning, and I want to make many more episodes, but trust me, I'm using all my free time to do this, and my capacity when it comes to my free time and energy are limited, so I can't always make 2 or 3 episodes a week, but I'm trying. So we'll see. When it comes to the first article, and we don't have to check all of these articles in its all entirety, is the one I found that it is named The Significance of the Sacred Seal of Solomon and Its Symbols. So we'll just read something a little bit from the beginning. This is the Seal of Solomon, known also as the Ring of Solomon, is believed to be a signet ring that belonged to the King Solomon of Israel. The ring is thought by some to have magical powers. That's the key topic for tonight. And it originates in Jewish tradition. Nevertheless, the Seal of Solomon can also be found in later Islamic and Western occultism, as both of these adopted it from Jewish tradition. And yeah, this is one of the sources that I also found, that later in Muslim religion, there are also some documents, when it comes to this Seal of Solomon. As a symbol, the Seal of Solomon is still in use today, and that's kind of scary, because as we know, a lot of old symbols are resurfacing and being used for the cultic practices nowadays, especially when it comes to neo-paganism. And one of its simplest depictions is either as a pentagram or as a hexagram, the later being similar to the Star of David. And this is what we'll soon see. Well, I can go up and you guys can see. Shaun, can you see my screen?
I can.
Okay, so on the left side, we can see this hexagram that honestly does look similar to the Star of David, even though it's not the same as the Star of David. So this is how it was represented besides pentagram. So pentagram would just have one of these sides less. So it will have penta, meaning 5. It will have 5 sides instead of 6. Shaun, before we continue going down, in your experience before you became man of God, when you were dealing with the New Age and the occultic practices, what was your experience with either a pentagram or a hexagram? What are the things that we see in movies or novels? What is mere superstition and addition to be fun? But what was really in your experience? How were these symbols used or abused?
Yeah, so the pentagram has a kind of a varied history. It was considered to be the perfect symbol, I think, by the school of Hermes Trismegistus. So as part of the some of the Grecian schools out of Alexandria that dealt with numbers and geometry, they considered that to be the perfect symbol. I think that there have been throughout history attempts to equate the 5 points of the pentagram to the 5 wounds of Christ. It is called the Druid's foot. It was a symbol that had some prevalence in early, in Pythagoras. Yeah, so he was one of the founders of a school of Alexandria. Let's see. So it had some prevalence in the early Western world. By Western, I mean Western Europe, not New World. And it has been used to get rid of witches. You'll see them oftentimes hung up on the barn door, and I think we'll see an allusion to that in when we actually read through the Testament of Solomon, that there was one of the demons who, if you were to hang up this 5-pointed star, they would flee. So it was used to ward off witches, to ward off demons. It is more often now associated with Wicca, and has become the kind of the main symbol of Wicca. They either call it the pentagram, which is the star, or the pentacle, which is the star within a circle. And so that kind of has become their or not slogan, but their main logo. And it really didn't have much to do with religious significance in the sense that it represented a religion, but it was more of a sacred symbol before. And I'm not really sure. I don't think we are really sure at all what importance it played in Druidic or Celtic spirituality. But I think the Wiccans would say that it was definitely their symbol, but I don't see it as having any sort of religious or ceremonial importance outside of just kind of a cultural symbol. Christianity, again, had adopted that as the 5 points of Christ's wounds. If you invert it, it becomes a symbol both of Mormonism and Masonry. So there's a fun tie in there. And also becomes a symbol of Satanism. So the satanic symbol is the 5-pointed star that's inverted, and superimposed over the star is a goat's head. And each of the points contains a letter of the Hebrew alphabet, the entirety reading Leviathan. So it's definitely a well-known and well-used symbol today, but it actually came to us out of really ancient traditions.
Thank you so much for that context. I just want to say that I myself, just like so many religious people today, I wouldn't know in the past that pentagram was not necessarily associated with something occultic or, as a symbol of Satanism. So once when I learned that early Christians used it as a sign of, like, one of the signs for Christianity, I was thinking, well, how many people, if you would ask in churches today, can you tell me something about this? They will all tell you just the negative side, but they wouldn't know the ancient context and the background that has some Christian connotation. So, usually people will be scared, like, don't play those games, don't watch those movies. But I think even though we should be guarded, there is no reason to be scared of just the mere sign. And also, any sign can be used or abused for any purposes. So yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, so the seal of God says that one source in which the seal of Solomon is mentioned is the Testament of Solomon. And that's one of the things that we'll be reading a lot tonight, and it's fun read. Unfortunately, I was able to only find Shakespearean English, so it's like reading King James Version Bible, which I don't like, but it is what it is. So this is a pseudepigraphic treatise on the forms and activities of demons and the charms effective against them. It has been claimed that this text was written by Solomon himself. Debatable, very debatable, and provides account of certain experiences that the king had during the building of the temple. I'm about to switch to the next slide, but Shaun, I mean, what are the chances that honestly Solomon wrote this? Because we found this almost 15 centuries after Solomon lived. It's like it's very vague. I honestly doubt it. Maybe there could be some, like, just like with First Enoch, could it be that there was some oral tradition that much later someone wrote down and maybe edited for the purpose of, like, explaining certain things?
I think the likelihood that there is a seed of this story that probably came from either Solomon or the people around Solomon, more likely the people that were just observing the events. I think that is probably true, but if you read the document, it's obviously a compilation. I mean, you have very early esoteric ideas, and then you have very late esoteric ideas, and they're kind of just thrown together. For example, the 36 demons that are really not necessarily demons; they're more like ailments. When he's kind of expounding, how do we get rid of you? First of all, most of them only respond to the risen Lord Christ. There's no real angel that frustrates them. And secondly, to get rid of them, there's some sort of like esoteric spell that they have to perform, whether you're gathering ingredients or you're binding something up. I mean, it looks very much like sympathetic magic. So this would have been very popular in the 16th and 17th centuries, and we have other writings from around that time that kind of allude to the same thing happening. But those were definitely not of they wouldn't have been very early because those ideas just hadn't manifested.
Cool, thanks. Okay, let me read this short article. And by the way, for all the articles we'll be assessing tonight and reading and commenting on, I provided all the links in the video's description. So I'm just giving credit to who the credit is due. Please check them out. Many of these are scholarly. Some are just from Wikipedia or whatever I was able to find that is, putting everything in the context. So, this one is scholarly. It's coming from Jewish Encyclopedia. So it talks about the seal of Solomon. It says the legend that Solomon possessed a seal ring on which the name of God, this is interesting, the name of God was engraved, and by means of which he controlled the demons, is related at length in GIT 68A and B. This legend is especially developed by Arabic writers who declare that the ring on which was engraved, quote unquote, the most great name of God, and which was given to Solomon from heaven, was partly brass and partly iron. With the brass part of the ring, Solomon signed his written commands to do the good genie, and with the iron part, he signed his commands to the evil genie or devils. The Arabic writers declare also that Solomon received 4 jewels from 4 different angels, and that he set them in one ring so that he could control the 4 elements. I'm sorry, this just reminds me of the Ring of Powers that ended a couple of months ago. If you guys watched the last couple of episodes, how Celebrimor was able to forge the rings, it just reminds me of the TV show. Anyway, the legend that Asmodeus once obtained possession of the ring and threw it into the sea, and that Solomon was thus deprived of his power until he discovered the ring inside a fish, also has an Arabic source. The legend of a magic ring by means of which the possessor could exorcise demons was current in the 1st century, as it was shown by Josephus' statement, which we'll be reading a little bit later. That one Eliezer exorcised demons in the presence of Vespasian by means of a ring, using incantations composed by Solomon. Fabricius thinks that the legend of the ring of Solomon thrown into the sea and found afterward inside the fish is derived from the story of the ring of Polycrates, a story which is related by Herodotus. Also Strabo, I'm trying to read these last names, and others, and which was the basis of Schiller's poem Des Ring des Polycrates. Okay, so this is German. The Arabs afterward gave the name of Solomon's seal to the 6-pointed star like the figure engraved on the bottom of their drinking cups. So this is very interesting. So now this sign, we can see the sign or the symbol, how it starts spreading, not just on documents, but they will start putting on cups and God knows where else. Probably again for the sake of protection. It is related in the Arabian Nights that Sinbad, in his 7th voyage, presented Harun al-Rashid cup on which the table of Solomon was represented, and Lane thinks that this was the figure of Solomon's seal. In Western legends, however, it is the pentacle or druid's foot, so called, that represents the seal. This figure, called by Bishop Kenneth the pentacle of Solomon, was supposed to have the power of driving away demons. It's interesting how the same story, I won't say necessarily a legend, I mean it turned out later into a legend, but it's interesting how the same story is, even though it has similar core, it still starts to change and evolves in a way, once when it transits from east side of the world to the west side, then it started, we see drastic changes. So that I'm just saying how that's interesting, because we can parallel this with mythologies and religions. We can have many times the same concept, and then it starts changing. Take the flood in so many stories. There's the core that is the same, but then from civilization to civilization, you have different details. Mephistopheles says, I think I should be rewarded for pronouncing this. Mephistopheles, and it sounds so much like Mephisto, but this is another Greek last name, so it's all good. Says to Faust that he's prevented from entering the house by the druid's foot, or pentagram, which guards the threshold. The work entitled, this is Latin, so I'll just butcher it as usual, Claviculae Salomonis, contains treatises on all kinds of pentacles. The tradition of Solomon's seal was the basis of Buchenthal's tragedy, specimens of which are given in some German magazine. A work regarding a magic signet ring is ascribed to Solomon. Okay. Shaun, this was a very interesting read. What would you like to say on this?
Yeah, so I think it's interesting that in the Islamic world, the six-sided star became the symbol of the Seal of Solomon. When, now when we think about Islam, or at least, conservative Islam, they don't use symbolism at all. All of their symbols have to be, their written script. But obviously that wasn't the case in the early time of Islam, nor was it the case in the early Jewish or Christian circles. I think that of course I'm a Westerner, but I think that the pentagram makes a lot more sense as the symbol than the hexagram does, because of the fact that there were 72 demons, and in the pentagram there are 72 degrees between each arm of the pentagram, and so it's the idea is that it's binding the 72 degrees, and so their degrees correspond to the demons. And so I think that not only is there probably attestation for it being earlier, even though it's removed from the part of the world from which it arises, but I think it's earlier, and I think it makes more sense.
I can't help it, but just when we're observing the Old Testament, the New Testament, the Jewish tradition, and now this legend of the Seal of Solomon, I can't help it but to see 70 or 72 mentioned everywhere. And I'm not getting superstitious. I'm just saying how for the ancient people, there are many numbers that were important for them theologically, spiritually, metaphorically, symbolically, in different ways, including number 12. But I see that 1772 was way more prevalent than I initially thought. So it's not just in the Old Testament and Book of Enoch. Now I see it even more, and of course, Jesus sending the 70 or the 72, for the commission, but also 72 degrees. It's like, okay, why is it 72 exact? It's just interesting. I don't know why, but that makes me think.
Yeah.
I would just encourage everyone to, make yourself a free account on academia.edu. It's a phenomenal page where so many scholars throughout the world, when it comes to any topic, are uploading portions of their books or scholarly articles, and you can download them for free. There's no limit. You can even contact one of the many authors. You can thank them for their work. It's just a phenomenal page that you can use. So it's Academia EDU. When I was checking the scholarly website for the Seal of Solomon, not surprisingly, many authors don't want to deal necessarily with stuff. They're like between a myth and a legend. There may be, for many academics, this can be below them to even deal with this, like because they're like academics, we don't want to deal with this. But thankfully, there's some good papers, and one of them comes from Esther Fernandez Medina, and there's no way we will read all of this. She has shared, and I'm thankful for this. She shared a chapter from this book that came in 2012, and the chapter covers pages 175 to 187. And again, we can't read all of this, but I just want to read the concluding part. Okay, there's some beautiful photos here. and she explains stuff, especially when it comes to the Islamic background. Also, she explains what are these letters, what is the meaning behind them. She goes to explain that all three monotheistic religions are behind all these letters, and she gives that explanation. So let me just come to the concluding part and I'll read it. Okay, so here we go. So she says the trope of Solomon's seal is documented in the Iberian Peninsula, at least from the 10th century. In some cases, it carried an eschatological meaning, and in others, it was employed for exorcism. Similarly, there are records documenting its use for prophylactic magic in manuscripts, talismans, and other objects by the three religions. So she's talking here again by those three monotheistic religions. In the last stage of the existence of Moriscos in Spain, the Seal of Solomon, due to its eschatological meaning, was employed by the Moriscos to warn community members of the imminent final judgment, the coming expulsion. In light of the Moriscos' marginal situation and the pressure they experienced, referencing the prophecy and redemption of the prophet Solomon after his apostasy, offered them a halo of hope. In a like manner, the conscious use of the seal in the forgeries of the Sacramonte attempts to deliver a message of religious syncretism to the entire population, which doubtlessly would have interpreted according to its cultural ascendancy and religious confession. Magic and messianism, both present in the Seal of Solomon, are also the privileged fields of hybrid encounters between Moriscos and the old Christians in Iberia. And here she shares all the bibliography, the sources she used. So we are now switching. Okay, we started with the Middle East, then we switched to the West. Spain, even though yes, it can be counted, southwest part of Europe, but usually when we say the West Europe, we don't necessarily think of Spain. So here we hear another source. It's like, okay, so there is this. I would assume the family of Moriscos. We see here that all three monotheistic religions were involved. We see that this was the seal that was related not just with prophet. They call him Solomon, not Solomon, but it's the same thing. But it's also had to do with eschatology, right? So it was warning them of the final judgment. And this is something that I believe all three monotheistic religions believe. Shaun, would you like to say something on this before we switch to a different section?
Yeah, I mean, it's it's interesting, and it always reminds me when I'm thinking about medieval Spain, the whole Iberian Peninsula there, that there was almost no Christian presence there after, I think it was like the year 750 or something like that. That part of the Muslim conquest was that they had conquered that area and pushed out the Christians. And so, that was almost 300 years before the Crusades started. So when we think about the Crusades, and which some of the more later developments of the ceremonial magic and stuff, is the West getting reintroduced to some of this stuff because it had been utterly lost in the West. And when they went East, they encountered it and they brought back facsimiles of what were there, or maybe even they brought back the documents themselves. And so one of the things that we have to remember about the Crusades is that there was 300 years of conflict where the Muslims were basically always the instigators prior to a response from the church. So as much as the Crusades can be looked at in a light of, the just senseless violence, they were really a concerted response to something that had been an ongoing problem, and really was causing a lot of suffering for the Christian faithful.
Okay, thanks for that. The next one is an article from Wikipedia. I'll just read the history part. The earliest references to Solomon's seal or signet stem from within Jewish traditions. It is first mentioned by the first century Jewish historian Josephus, and soon we'll be reading this, and is similarly referenced by the 3rd century Jewish magical text Sefer HaRazim, and an Agadic section of the tractate Gittin within the Babylonian Talmud as well. I think we mentioned Gittin by GIT in like a couple of articles ago. In parallel, a first century Greek manual of Judeo-Christian magic known as Testament of Solomon also makes references to the Seal of Solomon. So basically, the rest of the episode will be focusing on what Josephus has said, but even more the Testament of Solomon. So we want to know more about this magical ring. The tradition of Solomon's seal later made its way into Islamic Arab sources as Gershom Sholem, the founder of the modern academic study of Kabbalah, attests, quote unquote, it is difficult to say for how long certain definite names have been used for several or most common seals. The Arabs made many such terms especially popular, but such the names Seal of Solomon and Shield of David, which are often used interchangeably for the two emblems, go back to pre-Islamic Jewish magic. They did not originate among the Arabs who, incidentally, know only the designation Seal of Solomon. Okay, Shaun, can you please remember this part? I would like you to comment on this later. How now we're discovering another name, which is called the Shield of David, right? And they go to the pre-Islamic Jewish magic. So I would like to know if you know anything when it comes to Kabbalah and Jewish magic and how they were using or abusing the Seal of Solomon or the Shield of David. But just a moment so I can finish this. The legend of the Seal of Solomon was developed primarily by medieval Middle Eastern writers who related that the ring was engraved by God. Wow. Okay. So this is almost like the Ten Commandments, like with the finger of God, God gave 10 commandments to Moses, and supposedly, which I don't believe, but supposedly God also himself made this, engraved this ring and was given to the king directly from heaven. The ring was made from brass and iron, and the two parts were used to seal written commands to good and evil spirits, respectively. In one tale, a demon, either Asmodeus or Sacher, obtained possession of the ring and ruled in Solomon's stead for 40 days. In a variant of a tale of the ring of Polycrates from Herodotus, the demon eventually threw the ring into the sea. Again, this is like Lord of the Rings, throw to the Mountain of Doom. This is in the sea, okay, where it was swallowed by a fish. Caught by a charitable fisherman who unknowingly fed it to the displaced Solomon, restoring him to power. The date of origin legends surrounding the Seal of Solomon is difficult to establish. A legend of a magic ring with which the possessor could command demons was already current in the 1st century. Okay, so this is very early, not as, of course, in the times of Solomon, but at least we found here an early date than just mere 5th century or so. But the association of the name of Solomon with such a ring is likely medieval, notwithstanding the 2nd century apocryphal text, the Testament of Solomon. The tractate Gittin of the Talmud has a story involving Solomon, Asmodeus, and a ring with a divine name engraved. Solomon gives the ring and a chain to one Benahayu, son of Jehoiada, to catch the demon Ashmedai, to obtain the demon's help to build a temple. You can tell already this is bad. Like, no man needs demonic help to build a temple to God. That's like I don't know, asking a thief to go and rob a bank so you can go and build a church. Like, it's like, no, it doesn't work like that in the kingdom of God. Anyway, Ashmedai later tricks Solomon into giving him the ring and swallows it. The specification of the design of the seal as a hexagram seems to arise from a medieval Arab tradition. So this tradition came later. And most scholars assume that the symbol entered the Kabbalistic tradition of medieval Spain from Arabic literature. Okay, we see more connections here. So we see here Jewish tradition entering Arab tradition, entering Spain and Europe. The representation as a pentagram, by contrast, seems to arise in the Western tradition of Renaissance magic. So this even developed later. So we have the document from the 1st century, and here W. Kenneth in the 17th and 18th century makes reference to a pentacle of Solomon with the power of exorcism and demons. So we can see here how the story traces and develops and changes from the 1st century AD to the early 18th century. So that's it just, I don't know, it's amazing. God knows what is truth, if there's any truth to this, but I'm seeing how on the top of the original story, all these layers were built later. Hexagrams feature prominently in Jewish esoteric literature from the early medieval period, and it has been hypothesized that the tradition of Solomon's seal may possibly predate Islam and date to early rabbinical esoteric tradition to the early alchemy in Hellenistic Judaism in 3rd century Egypt. And I would say it makes perfect sense that it predated Islam because Islam came much later. The seal appears profusely in the decoration of the 17th century Catholic Sacromonte Abbey in Granada, Spain, as a symbol of wisdom. The seal of Solomon was also discovered in Palestine during the Ottoman period, when it was etched in stone above windows and doors and on Muslim tombs. A few examples were found in houses in Sardis and on graves in Jaffa. And this is also interesting. It's like one of those conspiracy novels. An Order of Solomon's seal was established in 1874 in Ethiopia, where the ruling house claimed descent from Solomon. I think they should do one of those DNA tests. But Shaun, I appreciate this historical part found on Wikipedia because it gives us even more context. You can comment on anything you would like to, but for me, is especially this was the interesting part that was mentioning pre-Islamic Jewish magic and how this could have been abused in Kabbalah.
All right, so I'm going to comment on that second. The first thing I'm going to comment on is the Ethiopian line. So the idea was that there was, between Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, that they conceived a child, and that she took him back to Ethiopia, and that he continued to reproduce, and that the line of the leaders of Ethiopia had continued unbroken. There was a period of an overthrow, I think, in the 1200s, but then there was a reestablishment of that family line, and then that had continued until the 1970s when there was a Marxist takeover. So I believe the Ethiopians even refer to themselves as Judeans because that line continues so strong. They believe that they are the descendants of Solomon, and that's why it is said that the Ark of the Covenant is in Ethiopia. In fact, they even have an official title of a defender of the Ark who is there to guard the Ark of the Covenant. So how much of that is true, I'm not sure, but it's one of those things that I love to think about. As far as the early Jewish magic, we don't really know much about that, and it probably was not widespread. You probably had small pockets of Jewish sorcery, because I think as Father Stephen DeYoung says, when you talk about Judaism, ancient Judaism, you have to refer to that as Judaisms, because there was no really like formalized form of Judaism. And so I think that there would have been certain groups where that would have been completely okay, and certain groups that would have been more like how we think of as like a modern Protestant Baptist kind of church. If you go to synagogue, you hear the word read, and then you go and you live your life that way. Which when we think of Judaism, that's really all we think about, but we don't really think about the more participatory aspects of it that would have been there. Now, Kabbalah likes to consider itself an ancient religion, but as far as I can tell, the earliest Kabbalistic, or at least formalized Kabbalistic traditions didn't arise until after the Great Schism. So you had 1,000 years of Christian history before you ever get to a formalized Kabbalistic tradition. So although it wants to consider itself ancient, it's not as ancient as a lot of the Christian traditions that we take for granted. So, and in fact, I think that some of the Kabbalistic traditions are actually indebted to the earlier Christian traditions.
Back at Moody Bible Institute, we had a class on Judaism, and among many other things, we covered very briefly Kabbalah. And it was, some of the things were so wild, and no wonder today we don't have, as you said, so many writings or documents that we can go. And thank God, because this was a distorted version of Judaism that people were abusing for magic, the occult, whatnot. But I remember from notes, again, this was from years ago, that they also had their own distorted version of the Trinity that had to do with space, with some embodied, was it angels or planets or something? And I was like, oh my gosh, but it's nothing like the biblical Trinity, just their own version of like three.
Yeah, they have the tree of life and the Sephiroth that contain the glory of God, and so then they treat that as like it's like God, but it's not God, and so yeah, they have. I think a lot of their metaphysics they get from the metaphysics of the day, which were thoroughly Christian.
Okay, so we get to read a portion which is thankfully small, because we just mentioned a couple of times Josephus, right? He was an early historian, and in the Antiquities of the Jews, book 8, there is this chapter 2 and verse 5. And when I say verse 5, the verse 5 is like a whole chapter. See, it's a whole paragraph that I'll be reading, because here we get to finally see the translated text, the first evidence of this, ring of Solomon, or the seal of Solomon. So, I'll be reading and Shaun can comment. Now the sagacity and wisdom which God has bestowed on Solomon was so great that he exceeded the ancients, in so much that he was no way inferior to the Egyptians, who are said to have been beyond all men in understanding. Nay, indeed, it is evident that their sagacity was very much inferior to that of the kings. He also excelled and distinguished himself in wisdom above those who were most eminent among the Hebrews at that time for shrewdness. Those I mean were Ethan and Heman and Chalcol and Darda, the sons of Mahol. He also composed book of odes and songs and 1005, of parables and similitudes. I don't know how to pronounce this. Okay. 3,000 in total. Wow, that's a lot. For he spake a parable upon every sort of tree, from the hyssop to the cedar, and in like manner also about beasts, about all sorts of living creatures, whether upon the earth, or in the seas, or in the air. For he was not unacquainted with any of their natures, nor omitted inquiries about them, but described them all like a philosopher, and demonstrated his exquisite knowledge of their several properties. God also enabled him to learn that skill which expels demons. Okay, so now we come to the interesting part, which is a science useful and sanative to men. He composed such incantations also by which distempers are alleviated. And he left behind him the manner of using exorcisms, by which they drive away demons, so that they never return. And this method of cure is of great force unto this day. So it means that a small section of Jews used to practice this for centuries. It is what it is. For I have seen a certain man of my own country, whose name was Eliezer, releasing people that were demoniacal in the presence of Vespasian and his sons and his captains and the whole multitude of his soldiers. The manner of the cure was this: he put a ring that had a root of one of those sorts mentioned by Solomon to the nostrils of the demoniac, after which he drew out the demon through his nostrils. Okay, I have to say, I never heard this type of exorcism. This is unique. It's, of course, I don't believe a second this happened, but it's so fun. So I like it because it's fun.
It does make sense, though. I mean, when you think about the root of spirit is spiration, which is breath, right? And so if you're going to place the spirit into something, the Bible references the breath in the nostrils when it says any creature that had breath in its nostrils was killed in the flood. It says that God breathed into Adam and he became a living soul. So the idea of a spirit entering through the breath, not only is that really common in Judaism and Christianity, but even when you think about things like yoga that are concerned with controlling the breath, and of course yoga is yoking oneself to an entity, that takes place through the controlling of the breath. So this idea that a spirit enters through the breath and would be able to be expelled through a breathing edifice, is that the right word? Maybe, but be able to be expelled through where you draw breath, that would that would make sense. I could see where they get the understanding from.
Okay, well, thank you for that context. And when the man fell down immediately, he adjured him to return into him no more, making still mention of Solomon and reciting the incantations which he composed. And when Eleazar would persuade and demonstrate to the spectators that he had such a power, he set a little way off a cup or basin full of water and commanded the demon, and he went out of the man to overturn it, and thereby to let the spectators know that he had left the man. And when this was done, the skill and wisdom of Solomon was shewed very manifestly. For which reason it is that all men may know the vastness of Solomon's abilities and how he was beloved of God, and that the extraordinary virtues of every kind with which the king was endowed may not be unknown to any people under the sun. For this reason, I say, it is that we have proceeded to speak so largely on these matters. Shaun, there's no way we can know this except God, which portion would be truth, which part is exaggerated. But let's make a parallel when Jesus comes to the scene. He doesn't do incantations, he doesn't do spells, he doesn't ask for anyone's help. He's like, I tell you, be gone. Boom. He doesn't have to demonstrate, he doesn't have to show himself, he doesn't have to prove himself. He's like, if you don't want to believe, you don't have to believe. Believe the actions. So even if this ring existed, and even if this ring had a power, and even if this ring was exorcising demons, paralleling this with the Gospels, how big is the difference between Jesus's exorcisms and us as humankind, trying in our own power, crafting tools, making incantations, including pentagrams, all these spells and stuff to just repel the devil instead of commanding in the name of Jesus? How much more powerful Jesus is than all these works of miracles?
Oh, and entirely. I mean, I think maybe the best case that you could make for making these things would be to liken it to medicine, right? So when Jesus heals somebody, he utterly heals them. So when in church we lay on hands on somebody and we ask that they be healed, if God so wishes to grant them the healing and they have the faith to receive it, they are healed in a way that defies our understanding of medicine. Whereas a doctor could go in and maybe do surgery and maybe cause a little bit of damage, but this is going to be collateral damage. They're getting rid of some of the aggressive tissue in order to alleviate the pain. So it's a little bit crude, but at the same time, it does offer some sort of help. Maybe that could be a parallel that they're drawing. Whereas these people, their heart was in the right place. They were trying to do the right thing. And so they had kind of created a pseudoscience surrounding the eviction of wicked spirits, the excommunication, or not excommunication, exorcism. So they had tried to create some idea of how they could do that to help the people that they served. And this was at a time prior to Christ. Then we see Paul coming in, and he's just laying it down, and to the point that the 7 sons of Sceva wanted to invoke the name of Jesus, even though they didn't believe, because it was more effective than all of their tools. So, on one hand, we can say, yes, Jesus is better in every way. But on the other hand, we can kind of see that they weren't just interested in like sorcery, that they were really interested in trying to meet a need, and so that there is something something good there, but we have something better, so we don't want to return to the type and shadow. We have Christ.
Yeah, I wanna agree with you, especially with the latter part, that this was a communal thing. So it's like if they didn't know, because this was in the times before Jesus, so they couldn't invoke or invite the name of Jesus, right? They didn't know. So for them was like, well, let's help my neighbor. He or she may be possessed or their child. This is the best way we can do it. I'm not defending that, but I'm seeing like what you're saying, that if it was a communal thing and I'm called to help my neighbor and love him or love her, I'm trying to do the best I can. And I don't think they even would think that this was going against God, like sinning. This was not like involved with necromancy. It was kind of vague, like what we consider now to be magic may not be for them. The same thing with astronomy and astrology. There could be different understanding. Like they could actually think like, hey, this item is God given, and because God blessed it and anointed it, now I can use it to repel evil. So why not using it to help my neighbor? So I'm starting to see also that perspective. And though again, I don't condone it, but I'm like, maybe that's, of course, if there's any truth in this, maybe that was the only way of them dealing with this, even though I'm puzzled that they wouldn't be praying to God like all the prophets in the Old Testament, like, God, can you remove this? Can you prevent this? Can you heal this? Can you bless this? So it's kind of a very interesting story, but a little bit like vague. Like we don't know so much because it's been the story has been so much changed in those 18th centuries, and you don't even know what was the original story. Nevertheless, I think it's fascinating. And once when we switch to the Testament of Solomon, actually read it, I think that will be the best part of the episode. And I just want to say, thankfully to our fast reading, we were able to do 50% or even more of the material in 50 minutes. So
Wow.
we're doing better than usual. Okay, so that was Josephus, and that was the seal or ring of Solomon. But what about the Testament of Solomon, right? So that's the second part of this episode. This is a very good Christian page, godquestions.org. I don't agree with them about everything. They tend to be dogmatic. They don't always see the things that I would see them when it comes to biblical or systematic theology. But overall, they have thousands of articles, and it doesn't hurt for us to check their sources on so many different questions.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to the Testament of Solomon, it says that it is a. Can you see my screen? You can, right? It is a work written centuries after the birth of Christ that claims to record the supernatural adventures of Solomon, the son of King David. The Testament of Solomon is structured somewhat like a deathbed confession, and we'll soon see that, or a letter meant for his heirs. Most of the book describes Solomon's enslavement of demons and his building of the temple through the power of a magical ring. The Testament of Solomon has an extremely late date of writing, blends various religious ideas, and is deeply tied to astrology. The book was never accepted as truth, let alone scripture, by the early church or Jewish communities. According to the Testament of Solomon, a young boy working in on the temple is plagued by a demon sucking out his life force through the right thumb. Solomon prays about this problem and is given a magical ring by the angel Michael. This object is sometimes referred to as the Seal of Solomon, and it was supposedly shaped like either a pentagram or a hexagram, like the Star of David. Using the ring, Solomon enslaves the demons and forces them to work on the temple project. Imagine enslaving demons to build a house for God. That's absolutely insane.
Well, I mean, God says for his altar that it can't be made of stone that has been worked by human hand, right? Because it'll profane the altar. He never said about demons, right? So maybe that's the way that they do the loophole, is demons aren't humans.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, this is funny on different levels. Solomon is also able to interrogate the demons, learning which problems they cause and how to defeat them. And this reminds me of the 20th and 21st century charismatic movements that they think if they ordered in the name of Jesus to the demonic possessed people, that demons, once when they give them information, that now Christians who exercise, this rebuke of the demon can use that information in the future spiritual warfare, which is not seen as wisdom by many different Christian churches. But this is what charismatics, not maybe everyone, but many of them do. And for me, that's not the wisest way. These stories intermingle Greek, Egyptian, and Christian spiritual ideas. The Testament of Solomon is deeply tied to astrology. The demons are associated with various stars and constellations. Okay, I don't see any problem with this because this is the ancient Near East context, as we know from Dr. Heiser and other scholars. So that's not the problem because that's how the ancient people would see stars.
Yeah, in fact, I think that lends credibility to an earlier date of at least that portion of the material, that they do associate them with the stars, because I think that's more of an ancient mindset.
Yeah. So like I said, this is a good website, but you may not agree with everything theologically, which is fine. There is no person or source of theology that you would agree with about everything. A type of medical alchemy is also prevalent. Demons speaking with Solomon take the blame for certain ailments and relate spells that can be used to remove their power. Many of the names given to demons in this work have been famous in mythology and literature, names such as Asmodeus and Abizu. The Testament of Solomon is dated to somewhat between the 3rd and 5th centuries, nearly 1500 years after the life of Solomon itself. In terms of value, the Testament of Solomon is useful only for insight into legends and myths regarding Solomon. Historians note that Solomon was a popular subject of stories during the early Christian era. Fictional accounts such as the Testament of Solomon reflect that interest. The contents of these texts don't agree with inspired scripture. Okay, we know that. Shaun, any comment before I switch to Wikipedia and then to the book itself?
Yeah, medical alchemy was a funny term that they used there. I think the word they were looking for was pharmacology, right? Because that's medical alchemy. And in fact, I think that they're superimposing some later categories on earlier works. It wasn't that this is an example of early alchemy. It's that alchemy is an outworking of these ideas. I mean, look at folk medicine from anywhere. And there's some of it that has real medical validity. Why? Because people aren't stupid, right? And they do stuff that works. So, I mean, I think the hubris that's in some of this is like, oh yeah, this is all, we're just going to dismiss all of it. Okay. You do you, man. But I don't think that that's very scholarly, they're obviously well-intentioned, but not really familiar with the arguments that are going on in some of this, the more critical spaces of, well, how do all these things work out? And in fact, the descendant of alchemy is modern science. So, to be dismissive of that would basically be the dismissive of our entire world. Everything that we have is a product of the scientific revolution, which is just an outworking of alchemy.
I skipped that Wikipedia article of giving historical and spiritual explanations of what is the Testament of Solomon, because we already read from godquestions.org, and I don't want to lose my breath or time for that. So now we're switching to the main part of tonight's episode. This book is available online for free. It's called The Testament of Solomon. You can Google it. I found, like I said, only this Shakespearean King James Version English, which is very difficult for me to read and pronounce, but I'll try. So Shaun will help me read this book, and then, well, not all, because it has 130 chapters. I want to cover the first 29 or 30 if we can, and then the last two, because I want you guys to see how Solomon, according to this source, ended. So everything comes with a price if you're being unwise. So let's say this is a complete forgery. It still has a very good, it has a sad ending, but it has a very good message for us to be on guard, right? So let's start reading with first 29 chapters. Shaun, can you see from your screen, or do you want me to enlarge these letters even more?
I can. I'm going to turn my camera off so that way we're not getting too intimate here while I try to read the screen.
Yeah, I would say go read the first 10 because they're very short, and I'll read the next several or 10, and then you'll read the next 10 if that's okay.
That works. Just let me know when to stop, and then let me know again.
Okay, we will comment once in a while. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. All right. Testament of Solomon, son of David, who was king in Jerusalem and mastered and controlled all spirits of the air, on the earth, and under the earth. By means of them also he wrought all the transcendent works of the temple, telling also of the authorities they wield against men, and by what angels these demons are brought to naught, of the sage Solomon. Blessed art thou, O Lord, who didst give Solomon such authority. Glory to thee, and might unto the ages. Amen. And behold, when the temple of the city of Jerusalem was being builded, and the artificers were working thereat, Ornias, the demon, came among them toward sunset, and he took away half of the pay of the chief deviser's little boy, as well as half of his food. He also continued to suck the thumb of his right hand every day, and the child grew thin, although he was very much loved by the king. So King Solomon called the boy one day and questioned him, saying, Do I not love thee more than all the artisans who are working in the temple of God? Do I not give thee double wages and a double supply of food? How is it that day by day and hour by hour thou growest thinner? But the child said to the king, I pray thee, O king, listen to what has befallen all that thy child hath, after we are all released from our work on the temple of God. After sunset, when I lie down to rest, one of the evil demons comes and takes away from me one half of my pay and one half of my food. Then he also takes hold of my right hand and sucks my thumb, and lo, my soul is oppressed, and so my body waxes thinner every day. Now, when I, Solomon, heard this, I entered the temple of God and prayed with all my soul, night and day, that the demon might be delivered into my hands, and that I might gain authority over him. And it came about through prayer that grace was given to me from the Lord Sabaoth by Michael, his archangel. He brought me a little ring having a seal consisting of an engraved stone, and said to me, Take, O Solomon, king, son of David, the gift which the Lord God has given thee, the highest Sabaoth. With it thou shalt lock up all the demons of the earth, male and female, and with their help thou shalt build up Jerusalem. But thou must wear this seal of God, and this engraving of the seal of the ring sent thee is Pentalpha. And I, Solomon, was overjoyed, and praised and glorified the God of heaven and earth. And on the morrow I called the boy, and gave him the ring, and said to him, Take this, and at the hour in which the demon shall come unto thee, throw this ring at the chest of the demon, and say to him, In the name of God, King Solomon calls thee hither, and then do thou come running to me, without having any misgivings of fear and respect of aught thou mayest hear on the part of the demon. So the child took the ring, and went off, and behold, at the customary hour, Ornias, the fierce demon, came like a burning fire to take the pay from the child. But the child, according to the instructions received from the king, threw the ring at the chest of the demon, and said, King Solomon calls thee hither. And then he went off at a run to the king. But the demon cried out aloud, saying, Child, why hast thou done this to me? Take the ring off me. I will render to thee the gold of the earth. Only take this off me, and forbear to lead me away to Solomon. But the child said to the demon, As the Lord God of Israel liveth, I will not brook thee. So come hither. And the child came at a run, rejoicing, to the king. And he said, I have brought the demon, O king, as thou didst command me, O my master. And behold, he stands before the gates of the court of thy palace, crying out and supplicating with a loud voice, offering me silver and gold of the earth, if I will only bring him unto thee. Okay. And when Solomon heard this, he rose up from his throne and went outside into the vestibule of the court of his palace. And there he saw the demon shuddering and trembling, and he said to him, Who art thou? And the demon answered, I am called Ornias. And Solomon said to him, Tell me, O demon, to what zodiacal sign thou art subject? And he answered, to the water poor, and those who are consumed with desire for the noble virgins upon the earth. These I strangle, but in case there is no disposition to sleep, I am changed into 3 forms. Wherever men come to see or come to be enamored of women, I metamorphose myself into a comely female, and I take hold of the men in their sleep and play with them. And after a while, I again take to my wings and hie me to the heavenly realms. I also appear as a lion, and I am commanded by all the demons. I am offspring of the archangel Uriel, the power of God.
Wow, this was some wild material, some wild first 10 chapters. Okay, Shaun, I cannot help myself but to see some parallels when Jesus comes to rebuke the devils, and they're like scared of him. They're like, please don't send us, don't send us there, but send us to the pigs. And in the same fashion, we see this mighty demon being supposedly scared of Solomon. So he's pleading with the child, please don't take me to, I don't want to be dealing with Solomon. I mean, for me, there's such a powerful parallel that it's like it just resembles of Christ. If you read, anyone who has read the gospel can immediately see that there is this picture that resembles Christ. So have you felt the same way when you read this story? And also, would you think that, hypothetically speaking, if different demons are assigned to be over different realms, would you be saying that this demon is kind of, well, maybe having different areas of life that he's dealing with or being a master over, but one of the things that he's also dealing with is sexuality. So he's luring men, punishing them, deceiving them. So maybe if you want to comment on those couple of things, including with him being trembling, just as demons are traveling before Jesus.
Yeah, so there's a few things that are in here that really stood out to me. The first thing being, of course, as you said, that this demon has dominion over certain aspects. And I think that those of us who are really into like the ancient worldview and the divine council would say that maybe those aspects that he has authority over as a demon were the aspects that he had participation in as an angel. And so when he fell, that he had corrupted those, or instead of maybe corrupting those, and has now a corrupting influence on those. So that before, where he would have been mediating graces to people through maybe he controlled lust. So maybe through the marriage bed, he was mediating graces of love and devotion to one another. Now he corrupts that and twists it and turns lust into something that might cause adultery and separate man and woman. So that's one thing that occurred to me. Another thing is that it kind of almost goes along with the divine council idea of, well, these demons are the disembodied spirits of giants who were the offspring of angels and men, because he references his father, but his father is a godly angel. So then how does that work? Because obviously not a fallen angel. And thirdly, I do see Christ as like the thing that the demon is afraid of, or at least represented in the figure of Solomon. And so part of me wonders, was this something that was original to the text, or was this something that came around in the Middle Ages, when the idea of the priest standing in persona Christi, where you could say that the spirit, at least as far as the church was concerned, that the spirit was subject to the priest in the same way he was subject to Christ, because he was standing in persona Christi, and he was ordering the demon. And in fact, I think in the excommunication rite, it's not I order you, it's Christ orders you. And so the priest is like basically saying, I'm standing in the place of Christ for this, and the demon sees me as Christ. Those are some interesting things to think about. But yeah, those are some of the things that I took from the text that were kind of jumping out at me.
Yeah, I also noticed you have a cool head. So we have something in common.
There you go.
Okay, so I'll be reading now from 11 to 20. I, Solomon, having heard the name of the archangel, prayed and glorified God, the Lord of heaven and earth. And I sealed the demon and set him to work at stone cutting. This continues amusing me. Like, hey, any demon I defeat, any spiritual entity I have victory over, don't just repel him to the Hades, to the underground. Make him useful to whatever I need to do. It's like it's so funny. I don't know.
Well, I mean,
So
but kind of, I mean, so if we were to just like make it super abstract in Christian kingdom building, it is kind of when we conquer a certain aspect of society that maybe was used for wickedness, and we conquer it for Christ, and then we can use that to build the kingdom. Maybe we can. I mean, maybe that's not the sense in which this is written, but maybe that's a way that we could apply that. Is, hey, it's kind of like this, where we conquer this for Christ. We take it. We plant our flag. It's for the kingdom. It's for glory. And this thing that was at one time used to oppose the church is now going to be used to build the church. That through the providence of the Father, He has placed it under Christ's feet.
yeah, I'm also thinking of the movie Noah's Ark, which so many Christians were complaining that is not biblical. But if you read First Enoch, then it makes more sense than just reading the Old Testament. But I'm just visually, as I'm listening to you, I'm there, and I'm thinking about those giants that were the product or abomination, and like Noah, in a way, either controlling them or making a deal with them, or maybe uh, not abusing them, but enslaving them for his purposes. Like, hey, help me build the ark. Let's to that stuff. And for me, again, it's very amusing to imagine something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, let's continue. So, and I sealed the demon and set him to work at stone cutting, so that he might cut the stones in the temple, which lying along the shore had been brought by the sea of Arabia. But he, fearful of the iron, continued and said to me, okay, this is the new information we're learning. The demon was afraid of the iron. Continued and said to me, I pray thee, King Solomon, let me go free, for I will bring you all the demons. And as he was not willing to be subject to me, I prayed the archangel Uriel to come and succor me. I don't know. I'm trying to pronounce this word properly.
It's like to minister to. So
Okay.
to help me.
And I forthwith beheld the archangel Uriel coming down to me from the heavens. And the angel bade the whales of the sea come out of the abyss. And he cast his destiny upon the ground, and that destiny made subject to him the great demon. And he commanded the great demon and bold Ornias to cut stones at the temple. And accordingly, I, Solomon, glorified the God of heaven and maker of the earth. And he bade Ornias come with his destiny, and gave him the seal, saying, away with thee, and bring me hither the prince of all the demons. Now it's getting even more interesting, because I was reading these chapters the other day.
Sorry, I was just going to say, when I read it, I was initially thinking that the iron was like being put in iron shackles, and of course I was thinking, well, there's an old tradition of why we use iron prison bars, and that's that iron is supposedly it contains evil. So, and I'm not sure how far back that idea goes, but the idea that iron is a container for evil, and that evil cannot permeate the iron. That's something that continues even maybe superstitiously, but to this day. But when reading, it just said the iron, not the irons. And I'm like, well, that would be odd if it was used for a shackle. I wonder if it's referring to the iron and the bronze that the ring were made out of, that one side was used to help the helpful demons, and the other side was used to punish the rebellious demons. And so I wonder if it's actually referring to the iron side of the ring that would bring punishment to the demon.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just thinking that when I did with backup, no, was it? No, it was with another archaeologist when we did the episode, probably at the beginning of the year, of the Iron Age biblical archaeology. We were talking about many findings and excavations and objects found in the Middle East that support or prove the Old Testament, stories to be true. Um, I forgot where I was going with this. Oh yeah, so the whole episode was the Iron Age archaeology. So the Iron Age, of course, came after the Stone Age and the Bronze Age. So I'm thinking, could it be also iron because iron was stronger than bronze and stone? So could it be also additional reason why any entity, physical, spiritual, whatever, in this case, it had to be an embodied demon. Otherwise, you can't put to chain like a spiritual being. So I'm thinking, could it be also because iron was stronger than bronze? Could it be also because at that time they started developing, armor and weaponry made of iron, which was way more stronger than what they had in previous era of societal development stage. So I'm also thinking about that, but of course I'm not sure.
Well, and so to add to that thought, I had watched something on one of the armoring and weaponry channels that are really popular, and there was the host had said that it's thought that the Iron Age weapons were better than the Bronze Age weapons, and he said, well, actually, that's not true. That the Iron Age weapons of that time were actually not as strong as Bronze Age weapons because they couldn't get the impurities out of the iron, but they were about as strong as the Bronze Age weapons. Now, when you get all the impurities out, obviously iron is much stronger than bronze. But the benefit to iron was that you didn't have to go through a multi-step process of getting the copper and the tin and then combining the two to form bronze. That iron was readily available, it was plentiful, and you just needed to be able to forge that with the technology that they had. It required a crucible to burn off some of the impurities, but obviously some remained. So it's interesting to think that even at that time, they may have valued bronze weapons as higher than iron weapons, but iron was more readily available and easier to equip an army with.
Yeah, I wonder, because not every civilization developed at the same pace. So I wonder at what time they managed to learn to make iron more purified and more solid and more stronger, that they were actually, like, we're learning this now, let's start massively implementing in our weapons and armor, or in this case, like as with shackles or chains. And of course I don't know this, but I mean, I occasionally follow these archaeological secular pages, and I marvel when they discover something really important. Like in Europe, they would find, or like in China, I think it was in China, the article, or somewhere in Asia, that they would find objects made of such a pure iron, and it will predate what they would initially think that iron started being used massively. But again, we're talking about Middle East, but now the stories go to Asia and to Europe. So I think that back on the south of my country, I think, unless I've forgotten the date, it was 14th centuries before Christ. They found this iron needle that is over 90% pure, and they brought American archaeologists and scientists trying to decipher how was this possible and what type of technology were the ancient people almost millennia and a half before Christ using on the south of my country, not that far from where I was born. And they don't have any answer. They're like, this would be very difficult to make even now with our technologies. Like, how is that needle? How is it possible that it is so pure? It contains over 90% of like pure iron, and they're like, we don't have the answer. So it's like, okay, this was the time 1500 years before Christ. So this was before the time of Solomon. So what does it mean? It means that usually in biblical archaeology and all these excavations, we, especially as religious people, we're usually focused on that small part of the world, Middle East, because that's where we believe and understand the civilizations came from, right? That's, all the three monotheistic religions came from for us, the Holy Scriptures, Messiah. So we always put emphasis on Israel and surrounding countries, including Turkey, right? But we don't go beyond that, because for us it's not so important. But is it, or right, is it not? Like sometimes we will put those boundaries, like, and I would do that in the past too. but like we limit so much of what is available out there. Not necessarily it has to be connected with the Bible for us to learn more and marvel, like, wow, history, humankind, civilizations, achievements, technology is way more complex than we think. It's not just what was happening like in that Middle Eastern period, like North Africa, Middle East, all that section about Mediterranean Sea. It's not just that. It's like there are more civilizations. And what if knowledge traveled? And what if, just if, we follow first Enoch, what if the fallen ones didn't come just to Middle East and reveal their technology and knowledge of these forbidden things and secret stuff? What if they went also to different regions of the world and gave them knowledge? What if, I don't know, I'm just saying, so like, how were those people able, and they're not primitive, yet someone told them how to make this super pure needle, and people can search this item out. It's you have many articles available. It's like it's an enigma,
right?
And that's why I want to say, like, we only know what we read from biblical or secular archaeologists, what they are telling us from Middle East, because that's our point of interest. But when it comes to other countries and continents, usually we don't pay so much attention unless, like in my case, we come from that region of the world. So that's interesting to us as well, because it's personal, it's subjective. I want to learn more about my heritage, about my people, DNA and stuff like that. So it's like, again, there's so many layers of development and just evolving, not in a biological sense, but when it comes to the sense of us learning a civilization, is Homo sapiens. There's so many things that, like, we're still discovering and digging out and learning, and then theories can be changed and dates, like, oh, this actually predates this actually predates this. We thought this was the oldest, but now we found a similar thing, maybe even better, in another civilization. So, I mean, that's what I'm saying. There's still so much that we didn't discover. So we can, when it comes to some things like this one, we can only, guess.
Right. Yeah, that's so important. We got to make sure we're not tightening our frames so small that we end up losing the picture of what was going on at that time. Because, yeah, maybe God was working specifically in a very specific way through a specific people, but that doesn't mean that God didn't care about everybody else, and he was expecting the angels to bring justice and righteousness, and to lead the whole world to look at the example of Israel, and then from there pointing to who the true God was. And so his expectation was that everybody would be taken care of, and that he was going to work through this small group in order to attract all the nations to them. But by no means was he just like, hey, you guys just do whatever. We're just going to leave you guys as, a little better than glorified monkeys. Like, no, not at all. Not at all.
Okay, chapter 13. So Ornias took the finger ring and went off to Beelzebub. This is why I said it's getting more and more interesting. Who has kingship over the demons? He said to him, Hither, Solomon calls thee. But Beelzebub, having heard, said to him, Tell me, who is this Solomon of whom thou speakest to me? Then Ornias threw the ring at the chest of Beelzebub, saying, Solomon the king calls thee. But Beelzebub cried aloud with a mighty voice, and shouted out a great burning flame of fire. And he arose and followed Ornias, and he came to Solomon. It's so funny that he's, there's a burning flame of fire coming out of his chest. It's almost like he's a type of dragon, which, in a way, if the devil is the Beelzebub or Beelzebub, there are two variants of the name, then in a way, he is that great dragon that, in a way can blow fire, like we read in the old mythologies and stories. Yet here, he's like, he's not powerful at all. Like, Ornias, who's below him, is able to throw the ring, say, hey, follow me. It's like, no big deal. I don't know.
If any of our audience are watching this, does anybody else think that this is like a Pokeball? Like, you throw it to catch a Pokemon? Like, as I was reading it, I'm just like, oh yeah, this is like early Pokemon. Like, oh, I'm gonna catch a demon.
Yeah. Okay, chapter 14. And when I saw the prince of demons, I glorified the Lord God. I have to say this I loved it in every paragraph, in every of these small chapters. Solomon glorifies God. So that's one of the best parts of the whole book.
Amen.
So he glorified the Lord God, maker of the heavens and earth, and said, Blessed art thou, Lord God Almighty, who hast given to Solomon thy servant wisdom, the assessor of the wise, and hast subject unto me all the power of the devil. Oof, this King James is making me tired. And I questioned him, and I said, Who art thou? The demon replied, I'm Beelzebub, the exarch of the demons. And all the demons have their chief seats close to me. And I it is who make manifest the operation of each demon. And he promised to bring me in bonds all the unclean spirits. And I again glorify the God of heaven and earth, as I do always give thanks to him. I then asked of the demon if there were females among them. And then he told me that there were. I said that I desired to see them. So Beelzebul went off at high speed and brought unto me Onoscalis, that had a very pretty shape and the skin of a fair-hued woman, and she tossed her head. Okay, before I continue, Shaun, are you familiar with any extra biblical writings coming in the Second Temple literature or in general with the Jewish literature that may describe any demon, any unclean spirit as females? Because usually they're either, I don't even know if they're gender neutral, if they will be neutral when it comes to gender, or they're usually portrayed just like giants, most of them to be males. Are you familiar with any females?
The only thing that I can think of, I'm really not familiar with any extra biblical literature, but I think it's in either Zephaniah or Zechariah. It's one of the Z prophets. It does reference winged females, and they're kind of in a negative context. So I wonder if that's a reference to like demonic beings. But no, I mean, you're right. When I think of demons, I always think of them as being male. It's also interesting that Solomon here is just such a dude. He's like, do you guys have women? Can I see them? Like, it's just, what? I mean, no.
But this aligns with his nature, how he
Yes.
became later. So
Yes, it does.
I mean, at least he was a guy. So I don't want to.
That's
Okay,
right.
no more about this. Okay. And when she was come, that's how it starts. And when she was come, I said to her, Tell me, who art thou? But she said to me, I'm called Onoscalis, a spirit brought, and there's Saturn question mark in parentheses, lurking upon the earth. There's a golden cave where I lie. And someone probably asked her, okay, can I check the cave? But I have a place where I have a place that ever shifts. At one time, I strangle men with a noose. At another, I creep up from the nature to the arms, or so-called worms in parentheses. But my most frequent dwelling places are the precipices, caves, right? How do you pronounce this? Ravines?
Ravines.
Ravines, okay. Oftentimes, however, do I consort with men in the semblance of a woman, and above all with those of a dark skin, for they share my star with me. Since they it is who privately or openly worship my star without knowing that they harm themselves, but they whet my appetite for further mischief. For they wish to provide money by means of memory, question mark for commemoration in parentheses, but I supply a little to those who worship me fairly. Shaun, this chapter 17 is so messed up on different levels. First, it seems like, please correct me if I'm wrong, that this demon can manifest as a female, but it may not be necessarily a female, and it also abuses certain type of men, and this demon allows them to worship this to worship this demon, and a certain star is mentioned. Again, this chapter is so messed up, but also so much theologically packed.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. The idea that a spirit would manifest in one form but withhold its true form, maybe even not have a true form, but just be able to show up in a multitude of forms that it's known as. I mean, that's all throughout, the pagan myths and literature. The idea that Saturn is a star, that's also really ancient. We didn't really know that Saturn was a planet until we were able to get I think it was probably before the telescope that we knew that Saturn was a planet. I was thinking that the first time we had seen Saturn was like in the 1800s.
And Saturn is associated with Satan, correct?
Yeah, it's associated with Satan, with Kronos. Saturn is the one that governs death. So and the dark skinned, apparently.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. Chapter 18. And I, Solomon, questioned her about her birth, and she replied, I was born of a voice untimely, the so-called echo of a man's order dropped in a wood. For the demon born of an echo, we have an analog in the Hebrew Bat called, quote unquote, the daughter of a voice, in the Gnostic hymn to Hermes, edited by Dietrich Abraxas, and so on. Chapter 19. And I said to her, under what star dost thou pass? And she answered me, under the star of the full moon, for the reason that the moon travels over most things. Then I said to her, and what angel is it that frustrates thee? And she said to me, he that in thee or through thee is reigning. And I thought that she mocked me and bade a soldier strike her. But she cried aloud and said, I am subjected to thee, O king, by the wisdom of God given to thee, and by the angel Joel. Okay, I can read 20, and then you can continue. So I commanded her to spin the hemp for the ropes used in the building of the house of God. And accordingly, when I had sealed and bound her, she was so overcome and brought to naught as to stand night and day spinning the hemp. I see here since the beginning that Solomon is giving this authority by God to seal and basically in a way condemn these entities in a similar way that God sent those fallen ones from Genesis 6 in Tartarus. So they're sealed. I'm not saying they're working or they're in any way related to these demons or to Solomon, but you can see that they're chained. Unlike those in Tartarus, these are also forced to work. But again, there's this similarity that both of them are chained, and in a way, this is their judgment. This is like there's no escape unless I decide by the mercy of God to let you go. And even if I do it, maybe I'm speaking if I would be King Solomon. If I do it, I would expect you to do something for me because you're not getting freedom for nothing. So I'm just saying that there's some similarities in Genesis 6, First Enoch, and here all these imprisoned demons as I don't see any good fate coming for them because God knows what they have done.
I also think it's interesting that the little bit there about him having the soldier strike her when he thought that she was lying, and it kind of reminded me of when Jesus was being questioned and he was struck by the guy saying, "Is that any way to answer your high priest?" And it's like, I don't know if they're trying to draw like this was something that was like unrighteous that Solomon did, because in the gospel it's definitely somebody who's acting unrighteous, but is acting maybe out of a misplaced sense of loyalty and virtue. But that just kind of caught me off guard that that would be included. I mean, and I understand, it's a demon and it does demon stuff and it's it's unrighteous, but it's just interesting that little bit was added, and it kind of felt like it was trying to hook onto something in the gospel.
Do you want to continue, please, between 21 and 29? So you have eight chapters, and then I'll read the last two.
Okay. And I at once bade another demon to be led unto me, and instantly there approached me the demon Asmodeus, bound, and I asked him, Who art thou? But he shot on me a glance of anger and rage and said, And who art thou? And I said to him, Thus punished as thou art, answerest thou me? But he with rage said to me, But how shall I answer thee? For thou art a son of man, whereas I was born of an angel's seed by a daughter of man, so that no word of our heavenly kind addressed to the earthborn can be overweening. Wherefore also my star is bright in heaven, and men call it some the wane, and some the dragon's child. I keep near unto this star. So ask me not many things, for thy kingdom also after a little time is to be disrupted, and thy glory is but for a season, and short will be thy tyranny over us, and then we shall again have free range over mankind, so as that they shall revere us as if we were gods, not knowing, men that they are, the names of the angels set over us. And
Shaun, just a second before you continue, I just want to say how this is why I wanted us to continue with these several more chapters, even though this, we could have be done with chapter 21. But I just want to say how when he says that he's the offspring of those fallen ones and the women, I'm like, isn't this what Enoch is talking about? Isn't this what we see in Genesis 6, later confirmed by Jude and Peter? Isn't this what is so fascinating when it comes to this ancient Near East context about the divine council, the Nephilim, the fallen ones, mating and procreating with these abominations? And here, this entity comes. Of course, we don't know what's true and what's false, but this entity comes and say, you don't know who I am. You're a son of man, but here I am coming. Like, look at my heritage. Like, look at my DNA. Like check out who I am. I'm like the big G here. Who are you? You're like son of man. And you wouldn't be so bad if you wouldn't have that ring. And guess what? Your reign over us and your kingdom is coming down. So I don't know if this was a prophecy, because this was later. This was written after Solomon. Well, I mean, for sure. So it could be just that someone who came maybe 1,000 years ago, or I don't know how long, wrote this after. So it sounds like a prophecy, but that person already knew how Solomon ended, so it wasn't a prophecy, it was just a tale. But I'm just saying how that whole paragraph is so spiritually significant for us to see, like, okay, so this entity is having the same origin like those in Genesis 6 when God decided to bring the flood. So even if they fled away after Solomon's short reign and power over them, their end is coming. So they're on the loose just for a season. It's like when you lose a dog and you can't find him, he may be lost for a few days or a few weeks. Or in some cases, when I watch those animal videos, owners find dogs in a few years, and for them that's like their whole life because they don't live long.
Right.
But even if millennia will be passed after these demons are on the loose, their end is coming, and no wonder they wanted to. Satan and these fallen principalities were trying, when Jesus was born, to kill all these Jewish male children born, because they're like, let's try to annihilate the coming Messiah. But there's no way you can annihilate Messiah.
No. Well, and one thing that I think is really interesting is, as I've said before, I think that the Testament of Solomon is a compilation. It was something that was worked on, and it has evidence of being from different ages. But the people who would want to date the whole thing very late are probably the same people who propound the Sethite view. And it's like, well, you can't have both. You can't say that the church knew nothing of the Genesis 6 worldview, and yet here in this work, extra canonical as it may be, is still the work of the culture of the church and of the Jews. And so it's like, they definitely were familiar with the idea that angels were copulating with men, or, well, women. But yeah, that was something that they had very well nested in their worldview. This is not something that just kind of came out of nowhere that, Dr. Heiser concocted. It's very well attested. All right, I'm going to continue here. And I, Solomon, on hearing this, bound him more carefully, and ordered him to be flogged with thongs of oxhide, and to tell me humbly what was his name and what his business. And he answered me, I am called Asmodeus among mortals, and my business is to plot against the newly wedded, so that they may not know one another. And I sever them utterly by my calamities, and I waste away the beauty of virgin women, and estrange their hearts. And I said to him, is this thy only business? And he answered me, I transport men into fits of madness and desire when they have wives of their own, so that they leave them and go off by night and day to others that belong to other men, with result that they commit sin and fall into murderous deeds. And I adjured him by the name of the Lord Sabaoth, saying, Fear God, Asmodeus, and tell me by what angel thou art frustrated. But he said, By Raphael, the archangel that stands before the throne of God. But the liver and gall of a fish put me to flight when smoked over ashes of the tamarisk. I asked again and said, hide not aught from me, for I am Solomon, son of David, king of Israel. Tell me the name of the fish which thou reverest. And he answered, It is the glanos by name, and is found in the rivers of Assyria. Wherefore it is that wherefore it is that I roam about in those parts. Now, interestingly, it's been a long time since I've read it, but I think in the Deuterocanonical book of Tobit, the main antagonist is Asmodeus. And I think that there is some sort of something to do with a fish there, where it is some sort of spell that is used to maybe not exercise, but to there was a curse, I believe, where every husbandman of this woman would die before they could consummate their marriage. And so I think that this was part of the whole story. So whoever wrote this was obviously familiar with that work, because there's some coherence going on here.
Yeah, I also wanted to add just one sentence. No wonder that many Christians were warning against this book and this material, because they're like, oh, it's legendary. Because one of the things that you should stay away, it's like it may not encourage, but it may supposedly portray a good side of magic, or in this case alchemy. Like, look at all these things, and this is what shamans would do, and pagans throughout the old civilizations. They would open a dead animal or kill an animal, open its inside parts, and try to do witchcraft or predict how the weather will be, or the whole season, or maybe dealing with if a woman cannot bear a child, or when it comes to the crop season, or with anything. So this was well known in the ancient world. They would use animal inside parts, kidneys, liver, guts, to do their own magic. And now we come to a similar part here in the Testament of Solomon. So it's I do understand when Christians would say stay away or be on guard, but it's not like us reading or talking about this will be going and practicing this. It is, again, very interesting book, very interesting I don't want to say legend, but a very interesting myth behind the whole story that encompasses so many things from history, from theology, from mythology, from alchemy, from magic, from superstition, from all these things, biblical and extra biblical books, and all of that is compiled and put together in this book. So, I may probably not believe a word, but I just find it a fascinating read. If you are one of those things that like supernatural things.
Well, and one of the things that I would probably say, I'm just thinking about it now. So in response to, if somebody were to bring that charge against this, would be okay, I understand that you see the sacrifices in the Old Testament as being substitutionary atonement, but there's many of the sacrifices that had no substitutionary, that there was nothing substitutionary happening. So you're killing an animal, you're disemboweling it, you're burning the kidneys and the fat and the liver, and then you're taking the hide off, and there's all of these things that are still prevalent, and we just kind of dismiss them as being, oh well, yeah, but that was a picture of Christ. Well, yeah, but you're cutting an animal open, you've got certain things to do with his insides, you're smearing the blood. We kind of do have a very shamanic primitive religion before the incarnation of Christ, and even after that, we congregate every Sunday to go and receive the body and blood of our dead God. Well, wait a minute. Well, I shouldn't say he died and rose again. I don't want to make anybody. Yeah. Don't correct me. But no, like it is. There is a sense in which there is this this tactile, like it's so visceral, and that's what the shamanic religions are getting at. But that's present in Christianity too. If we don't just get too heady about it, if we understand that God works through things, and like I said, in Tobit, which is deuterocanonical, there's many of the Protestant religion or Protestant persuasion that don't regard it at all. But the reformers all viewed it as great for moral inspiration. So at least at the impetus of where our traditions come from, they still had interaction with it. So it's not like this should just be like put on a shelf and never looked at again. Like they had interaction with it. And so this idea, you could also get to why Christ spit in the mud and smeared mud on somebody's eyes. I mean, God works through things. He's a part of this world. Although he's transcendent to it, he's the Lord of this world. And when he created it, he said that everything was good. Many of the plants we know are good for medicine. So God created this world, and maybe he didn't create it in view of a fall in which there would be sickness and death. But yet in his grace, he has placed a way in the world to combat sickness and death, which I think is beautiful and shows this, really present nature of our God. I'm rambling. I will read. All right. And I said to him, hast thou nothing else about thee, Asmodeus? And he answered, the power of God knoweth, which hath bound me with the indissoluble bounds of yonder one seal, that whatever I have told thee is true. I pray thee, King Solomon, condemn me not to go into water. But I smiled and said to him, as the God of my fathers liveth, I will lay iron on thee to wear, but thou shalt also make the clay for the entire construction of the temple, treading it down with thy feet. And I ordered them to give him 10 water jars to carry water in. And the demon groaned terribly, and did the work I ordered him to. And this I did because that fierce demon Asmodeus knew even the future, and I, Solomon, glorified God, who gave wisdom to me, Solomon, his servant. And the liver of the fish and its gall I hung on the spike of a reed and burned it over Asmodeus, because of his being so strong, and his unbearable malice was frustrated. And I summoned again to stand before me Beelzebub, the prince of demons, and I sat him down on a raised seat of honor, and said to him, why art thou alone, prince of the demons? And he said to me, because I alone am left of the angels of heaven that came down. For I was first angel in the first heaven, being entitled Beelzebub, and now I control all those who are bound in Tartarus. But I too have a child, and he haunts the Red Sea. And on any suitable occasion, he comes up to me again, being subject to me, and reveals to me what he has done, and I support him. I, Solomon, said unto him, Beelzebub, what is thy employment? And he answered me, I destroy kings. I ally myself with foreign tyrants, and my own demons I set on to men, in order that the latter may believe in them and be lost. And the chosen servants of God, priests and faithful men, I excite unto desires for wicked sins and evil heresies and lawless deeds, and they obey me. And I bear them on to destruction, and I inspire men with envy and desire for murder, and for wars and sodomy and other evil things, and I will destroy the world. So I said unto him, bring to me thy child, who is, as thou sayest, in the Red Sea. But he said to me, I will not bring him to thee, but there shall come to me another demon called Enochian. Him will I bind, and he will bring him up from the deep unto me. And I said to him, how comes thy son to be in the depth of the sea? And what is his name? And he answered me, ask me not, for thou canst not learn from me. However, he will come to thee by any command, and will tell thee openly. All right, so you want me to read 29? My bad.
Yeah, that's the last one.
And I said to him, tell me by what angel thou art frustrated. And he answered, "By the holy and precious name of the Almighty God, called by the Hebrews by a row of numbers, of which the sum is 644. And among the Greeks, it is Emmanuel. And if one of the Romans adjure me by the great name of the power of Elaeth, I disappear at once."
Okay, so this was obviously a later edition of the God knows how old document, because Emmanuel, I mean, of course, we know this from Isaiah, but I still think it could have been written after the birth
Yeah,
of Jesus. It seems like it has, not just ancient Jewish influence, but also Christian influence.
yes.
But dude, like, this is the main bad dude. When he said he's the one who is encouraging people to speak evil heresies. I'm like, man, so of course, hypothetically speaking, so you're the one who is creating all these cults and all these heresies, and we can name them. There are so many, and you're the one who tells those demons underneath you. It's like reading screw tape letters. Seriously, it's like a chief demon, uncle demon, telling to the apprentice demon, his nephew, go and do this and this and this. I command you. I give you the strategy because I have been living for so long. I know how to deceive man. So now this entity is going to deceive them. But also the crucial word on the top of all of that is when he said that he's in charge of all these. So it's going back to the chapter 26. He says, and now I control all those who are bound in Tartarus. And again, this is First Enoch, and this is what Peter is mentioning, talking about. And I'm like, dude, I mean, I don't see how this is not Satan. Like, who among that structure of demonic powers would be stronger than Satan? And here we see him as the one who is in charge of the fallen ones. So it's like, this is the main bad dude.
Well, and as we said, in the Bible, Satan is a title. It's not a given name. So that's not to say that it's not identified with an individual. Obviously, by the New Testament, it's identified as with an individual rebel, but his name is never given in the Bible. So maybe his name is Beelzebub. Maybe that is the angel's name. But I mean, it's interesting to speculate. But I think there's a reason the Bible never gives him a name, because it doesn't want to honor him with a name.
Okay, let me read the last two chapters, 129 and 130. And when I'm done reading, you guys will see why I wanted us to read this. So in the meantime, between chapters 30 and 128, the story repeats. Solomon is just dealing with different demonic entities, right? So you guys can go and read. This book is available for free. But let us see the ending. And when I answered that I would know that I would on no account worship strange gods, they told the maiden not to sleep with me until I complied and sacrificed to the gods. So he was in this dialogue with entities, and of course, SEX had to be involved in the whole story and the deal. And because he was a man that liked women, he liked many, many women. We can see this in the Bible. This was for him a temptation. Like for most men, it would be. Like, just be honest, we're men, right? We have urges, God-given urges, but if we don't control them, they can overcome us and they can enslave us. So I like that he at the beginning says that he would in no account worship strange gods.
And this woman referencing is the Shunammite woman from the Song of Songs, right?
I'm not sure about that.
Okay, because I do remember it being a Shunammite, but I was wondering if that was the reference that it was going for, if there was another reference to a Shunammite woman in Solomon, but that was just the one that I picked up on.
Yeah. Well, he only had 1,000, so who can remember the names? I then was moved. This is when the story starts going down, unfortunately. I then was moved, but crafty Eras. Dude, I thought this is from Greek mythology, right?
Yeah, Eros is the god of eroticism and sex. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know why he's involved here. And again, this shows some later editions of the original letter. But anyway, so he brought and laid by her for me 5 grasshoppers, saying, take these grasshoppers and crush them together in the name of the god Moloch. and then will I sleep with you. And this I actually did. So this is the beginning of his ending. This is why I wanted us to read this to the last 2 chapters together. And this is what I actually did. And at once the Spirit of God departed from me, and I became weak as well as foolish in my words. And after that I obliged by her to build a temple of idols to Baal, and to Rapha, and to Moloch, and to the other idols. Dude just couldn't stop building temples.
Well, and the number 5 there, I think, is symbolic too, because it wasn't it 5 pomegranate seeds that Persephone was given by Hades, and that she ate them, and so she had to become the queen of the underworld. I mean,
I don't know that.
It reminds me so much of a Greek myth, and the fact that they include Eros there. It's like, man, I mean, this part might have been added, even during the Renaissance. It's such a like, it just stands out, like, so from what we know. But I'll let you continue.
Yeah, it just said, so that's what I'm saying. We see this from the Bible. Of course, we don't see these details, but we see in the Bible that it is possible to serve God and love him and just to depart from him for different reasons. And that can happen to any of us. I don't like when people, just because I went to theology school or just because I lead this podcast, when I meet them in person, they give me so many compliments and they think I'm such an amazing person. I'm thinking many times, dude, you don't even know my dark side, my temptations, my sin, my struggles. Don't think of me too highly. I tell them you'll be disappointed, because all of us, absolutely all, except Jesus, is able to follow the path of Solomon. You can be blessed and used by God, and the next day you can be just finishing in the temple of a prostitute because you cannot control your urges. So this is why I wanted us to read. He was blessing and thanking God in every chapter, in every of these paragraphs, and by the end, he just went down, despite of God using him, blessing him, giving him all the riches, all the wisdom, because we are weak. We are weak. So chapter 130, I then, wretch that I am, followed her advice, and the glory of God quite departed from me, and my spirit was darkened, and I became the sport of idols and demons. Wherefore I wrote out this testament, that ye who get possession of it may pity and attend to the last things and not to the first, so that ye may find grace forever and ever. Amen. Shaun, again, we don't know what is true and how many times this testament was edited, but it's a sad story. God can use you, can bless you, can give you so much. And this is why the Bible says, you who think you're standing, be aware, because you may be falling down. I mean, we know the stories of Rabbi Zechariah. We know the stories of Stephen Lawson. And I did not throw them books, because I still cherish their books, despite of their flawed character. But that's also all of us. That's all. I don't have to go and sleep with someone or do something horrible to recognize that in my heart, in my mind, I already have different thoughts, different images, different temptations that come to me daily. I don't have to go and obey them and listen to them, but I still have them. We all deal with different temptations and different urges. So Solomon's fall was great, and it's easy for us to judge him, 3,500 years ago after he lived, but we were not in his shoes. Being available to have everything at your disposal, all these riches, all those women, all those concubines, and by you guarding yourself, but then opening yourself to all of that, they will bring their idols and their gods in your life. And we saw that as long as he was praising God in all of these chapters, 128, he was clean before God. In the last 2 chapters, he fell. I know that sometimes Christians are debating with themselves among each other, like, was Solomon saved by the end? Did he repented? And there are those who say no. There are those who say yes. I hope he actually did, because the grace of God is enormous and, of course, undeserving. And I hope that he found peace with God. I just want to say, hey, Ember, welcome. We've been streaming for 2 hours. We'll be done probably in the next 15 minutes. But, of course, you're welcome to watch. Shaun, would you like to say anything about this before we switch to the archaeological part with this amulet from Solomon's well, not from Solomon's time, but with his inscription, and then we'll be ending. Would you like to add anything on this ending of the Testament of Solomon?
Yeah, I mean it's such a powerful reminder that you are not judged by God based on the things that you've done, bad or good, right? So Paul said that he had run the race and he had kept the faith, right? Um, that's what's important. Not looking back at, oh, but I've done this and this and this and these other things. When Jesus in Matthew 7:21, when he's talking about the people who will come before him and say, but didn't I do this and didn't I do this? Anyone who's bringing up the deeds that they've done and saying like, hey, let this speak for me. I want to be justified by this, what I've done. Those are not the people who are right with God, right? Those are the people they're clinging to their own works. They're clinging to who they used to be. But that doesn't have any bearing on who you are today, right? Who you are today is the person that's the life that you're living now. It's the walk that you have now. It's the prayer time, the devotion, and not to get legalistic about it, not to put a number on it, but are you walking with God, right? Like in any sense, are you walking with God? And if you're not, man, you need to get right, because you can't look back and say, yeah, but I did this. But I mean, look at all this stuff that I have, even us, right? We can't sit there and say, look, we've got 100 some episodes on this podcast. Doesn't that mean we're such great Christians? Depending on the day, right? Depending on the day. There's days where you'd be like, oh man, Shaun's a great Christian. He's living for God. And then there's some days where, I mean, if you were living in my shoes, you'd be like, bro, do you know the Lord? Like, I mean, dude, like, just to be real about it, like that's the stuff that we fight with. And I'm sure that's our audience feels the same way, if you're honest with yourself, right? So just remember that the last things, those things are more important than what came before. What came before, like, that's to get you to this place. Like, what are you going to do with it now? If you've got bad things that happened in the past and you made mistakes, right? Let that propel you forward and to becoming a great servant of God. And if you did great things in the past, bro, don't turn that into an idol. Don't let that trip you and it be your fall, right? Because there's going to be, in eternity, there's going to be lots of stories of people who they had everything together and they fumbled it at the end, right? And it's not about works, but it's about faith. But man, if you let your faith die, what do you got? If you don't have Christ, you've got nothing.
Indeed. I also want to thank this guy who he's not a Christian, but he occasionally comes and he's always respectful. I mean, his nickname is Hellbound Heath, and I remember him a month or 2 months ago. He said, "I'm going to subscribe to your channel because I want you to have 1,000." So we may disagree about God, we may disagree about Bible. I know he left because he posted this an hour ago, but I just want to say that this is a good example of what I've been trying to establish since the beginning, that all of you are welcome as long as you're kind. We don't have to agree with everything. I'm not trying to convert you by force, but we want to create good material, truthful material. And if you ever think it's trying to proselytize you, you're free to go, but you're also welcome to stay. That's my point. And I also want to thank this guy because, whatever, regardless of his nickname and that profile of, right, like Satan, um, you know, I don't have nothing against the guy. And if you're an atheist or skeptic or a member of other religion, you're welcome to stay with us on any given episode, and whatever the topic we're covering. So I want to say that these are good examples that we occasionally have atheists or whoever he is. I don't want to assume he's a Satanist, but I just want to say that I love you guys and Shaun loves you, and you're welcome here. We'll be done very soon, probably in the next 15-ish minutes or so. And we'll be, so we covered the seal or the ring of Solomon, then the Testament of Solomon, then something else regarding Solomon that has to do with archaeology. And these are two short articles. about the same thing. This one is called Newly Discovered Ancient Amulet, references band tale of King Solomon fighting demons. And this is not the video of that, so that's why I don't want to play it. It has nothing to do with our episode. Okay. A 5th century amulet depicting the demon fighting King Solomon has been found by archaeologists in Turkey, referencing a book banned from the Bible for including themes of dark magic. I have to correct this. The book was never in the Bible, so the book that is not part of the canon cannot be banned.
Right.
That does not make sense logically. But I understand that the author of this article is probably not a person of faith, so they don't know much. So this is their attempt to try to describe, but it's not banned. It's just never part of the canon. It has way less credibility than even First Enoch, which is also not part of the canon unless you're Ethiopian, but still first Enoch has more reputation than Testament of Solomon, but that doesn't mean we cannot read it.
Well, and if I may say, how do they think we have it today? The reason we have it is because Christians continued to copy it, right? Like it's not that they like, oh, they just wanted to hide it and burn it. It wasn't like the recension that happened with the Quran, where anything that wasn't in it or disagreed with it got burnt and like, oh yeah, you can't ever mention it. No, like it was Christian monks who continued to copy this stuff. They're like, yeah, no, it's definitely not canon, but dude, it's just so fun, right? It's like a good fictional account and it's edifying, right? I mean, that part that we read at the end there, so edifying. Like that's the moral of the story. The power of God, glorifying God all throughout, the power of God over the demons. Like, I mean, for me, that's better than the Avengers, right? Like, well, let's make a movie about that. We don't have to put it in our canon, but let's be real. It was the Christians that kept this thing alive. So no, it wasn't part of a banned book. It wasn't against orthodoxy. It just wasn't part of the canon.
Yeah, exactly. The amulet was found among the ruins of a military structure in an ancient quarter of the Turkish city of Paphlagonia by archaeologists from Kabaruk University, according to Life Science. The city would have been under the rule of the Roman Empire at the time the amulet was made and worn. On the object is a depiction of King Solomon riding a horse. Okay, so these are probably, I don't know if you guys can see my mouse pointer, but yeah, you can see at the lower part of the amulet like legs of a horse, and the upper part you can see that like halo, like a circle of I would imagine that would be King Solomon's head. So he's depicted as riding on a horse, who, according to the apocryphal text, the Testament of Solomon, was given a magic ring by the Archangel Michael. This pendant, used as an amulet, draws attention with the inscriptions on both sides and the depiction on it, said Dr. Ersin Selikbas from Karabük University's Department of Archaeology, according to the Daily Mail. The amulet depicts Prophet Solomon on a horse, holding a spear, defeating the devil. This is like a pre-picture of Saint George killing the dragon. It's like so similar. It's like, I don't know. I see so many similarities with this, and it doesn't mean it's bad or like one stole from another. It just means there's this unifying theme of God's representative until we see Messiah himself, killing the dragon. So in the meantime, they're all killing small dragons until Messiah, the victorious one with capital V, kills the main dragon, the main reptile. The pendant is described with the phrase, "Our Lord who defeated the devil." According to the Testament of Solomon, the I don't know how to pronounce this, eponymous hero, I don't know, who used that ring to command demons, including notorious demonic honcho Beelzebub, and to complete the destruction of his temple. I wonder if these are those demons that were captured to build the temple, Shaun. Okay. The names of 4 archangels. Wait, let me see. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. I don't know. We can always create a new conspiracy and more material for the next episode. So the names of 4 archangels were also inscribed on the back of the amulet. Azrael, Gabriel, Michael, and Israfil. Okay, this is a new name to me. Israfil, all carved in Greek. While Solomon, the song of King David, and this is son, not the song. This was misspelled. While Solomon, the son of King David, and the builder of the first temple, is a well-known biblical figure, the amulet is an apparent reference to the apocryphal text, the Testament of Solomon. I wonder if this post was originally in foreign language and they just used Google Translator because it's poorly translated. But anyway, that text was written in the Greek language and dates back not to the times of ancient Israel, but to the 6th century, according to the academic paper Reconsidering the Testament of Solomon from Sarah Schwartz. That paper further argues that the Testament of Solomon, available to modern readers, was likely formalized in the medieval period. Okay, finally, this is what we've been talking about. It could have early origin, but it has been edited for over 1,500 years. So formalized in the medieval period, and that the text someone from the first millennium would have access to would likely be very different. Yes, that's what Shaun and I assumed and happened to be true. Schwartz also points out a foible of translating the word demon. The original Greek word is daimon, which in ancient Greek culture did not have the same negative and hellish associations that the word demon has for contemporary readers. Okay, I know that we covered this in one of the past episodes. I can't remember which one, but we were talking about the same thing. Like in Greek, what is the daemon, and is it necessarily a demon or just a spirit entity?
Yeah.
You want to say something?
Yeah, I was just gonna say the diamond is just a like a wise spirit. So like it doesn't necessarily mean that it's good or bad. It's just kind of like the embodiment of some sort of property. And so like the muses, for an example, that's something that's really well known. They would have been considered diamonds or daemons. I think even Zeus is referred to as a daemon. So like it's I think I would say that it has as wide a usage as like our word Elohim. So it kind of has the same meaning, like something that's proper to the spiritual world.
Yeah, I'm just Googling. There's this novel that was turned into a TV show, His Dark Materials, written by Philip Pullman. And in his novels and TV show, there are all these creatures called diamonds, not demons, but diamonds, that are represented to each of them is a certain type of an animal, and each human has its own diamond, which is an animal. Mm-hmm. So first, I'm saying, coming as a Christian, you may think, oh, it's a demon, but it's actually a spiritual entity that is materialized in a shape and form of an animal. So it's interesting. I don't know. The Testament of Solomon is not considered a canonical work by either Christians or Jews. In the early parts of the millennium, when the Bible had yet to be formalized by any organization of Christians, many apocryphal texts were written and considered extra-textual to the Torah, Tanakh, Gospel, letters, and other canonical texts. Solomon was excluded due to its casual inclusion and interaction with demons. This text also claims that Solomon's temple was first constructed with the help of demons. Okay, and let me now share the other archaeological article, and we'll be done for tonight. It's called a 1600-year-old amulet depicting King Solomon spearing the devil found in Turkey. The King Solomon pendant likely belonged to a cavalry soldier. See, this detail we didn't know in the previous article. This way is always good to check multiple sources for anything you would like to research. So it belonged to a cavalry soldier stationed in the ancient Byzantine city of Hadrianopolis. Okay, and it's a beautiful one. Archaeologists in Turkey have uncovered a rare 5th century Christian pendant depicting King Solomon on horseback spearing the devil. It is the only pendant of its kind discovered in Anatolia, a region that covers much of modern-day Turkey to date. Both sides of the bronze pendant feature inscriptions in ancient Greek. The text of the King Solomon side translates to our Lord defeating evil, and Lord honestly should be translated as low L, because in this case it's just talking about Solomon as their master, as their king, but not like Lord God. While the other side names four angels: Azrael, Gabriel, Michael, and Israel. It is a symbol of religion and power. Ersin Celibas, an archaeologist at Karabük University in Turkey who oversaw the excavation, told Life Science. The pendant was used as an amulet, a charm that was thought to protect against evil or danger, he said in a translated statement. According to the Hebrew Bible, Solomon was a ruler of ancient Israel during the 10th century BC, but there is little archaeological evidence to confirm the biblical account. Yet, sooner or later, we will find out that this is true, as everything else in the Bible, especially Old Testament, that people will be skeptical about. We will later find seals, inscriptions, rings, manuscripts, documents to prove all of these things to be true. Though Celibas is certain that the artifact is a Christian pendant, now quote unquote, Solomon is an important figure in all three holy religions, he said in the statement. While he's referred to as a ruler in the Torah and the Bible, he's also recognized as a prophet in Islam. The depiction of Solomon on this pendant surprised us and revealed the importance of the artifact for Anatolian archaeology. Archaeologists uncovered the pendant during excavations at Hadrianopolis. This ancient settlement in Paphlagonia, a region in north-central Turkey on the coast of the Black Sea, became a city under the Romans. It was called Hadrianopolis for the Roman Emperor Hadrian, who ruled from AD 117 to 138 and was rebuilt in the early Byzantine period. Today it is located in the vicinity of the city Karabük. And again, it looks really beautiful. The site of the ancient city is famous for its animal mosaics, and excavations have revealed baths, churches, fortifications, burials, a theater, villas, and other structure, the statement said. The pendant was discovered in a building that might be related to military activity, although its function is still unknown. In our previous excavations, this Turkish archaeologist says, we had determined the existence of a cavalry unit here. Prophet Solomon is also known as the commander of armies. We understand that he was also considered as a protective figure for the Roman and Byzantine cavalry in Hadrianopolis. So Shaun, in a way, he's like the saints of the New Testament. Like they're like in a way like replacing the fallen ones and sort of have protection over a certain area. It's like not for superstitious reasons, but like, hey, instead of the evil ones who fell and they didn't hold their position, they didn't do their job. Now we have saints in the New Testament. So in a way, this comes before the saints of the New Testament, because for these early Christians, they don't have any New Testament saints or like disciples or whoever. They would use Prophet Solomon as their like almost like, hey, this is a God-given protector over this this region. That's the context I'm getting here.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's fitting, and I think that it was also part of the Jewish experience that those who went before them would be able to in some way intercede or ask for help. There's that famous line that Rachel is weeping for her children, right? And so the idea that there's still some sort of communal continuity there, that it's still, there's still one community, and that they will still help each other. I don't know if it was exactly mapping on to like what the church later had with the saints, but it also wasn't like an ancestor worship kind of thing. It was more that they still, even though they're dead, they still care about us.
Yeah, like sort of not mediator like Jesus, because Jesus mediates salvation, but sort of a mediator like, I mean, I don't know, I'm just trying to understand, but maybe like, hey, maybe even through me, even though I dead, but if I serve God, but maybe even through me, especially if I carry this ring, God can still bestow through his grace some sort of protection, not because of me, but because God can still use, the old saints who are alive in his sight. Something of that sort. I'm just trying to paraphrase. Okay, I'm almost done. Based on the archaeological layer where they found the pendant, the archaeologists dated the artifact to the 5th century, when Hadrianopolis was part of the Byzantine Empire. He added, Emperor Constantine, who ruled a few centuries after Hadrian, later split the Roman Empire in two, leading to the creation of the Byzantine Empire in AD 330. Although the pendant is the first of its kind discovered in Anatolia, Celibbus is aware of one previously found in Jerusalem. Okay, this is new information. Very interesting. The presence of similar artifacts in these two distant geographies indicates that Hadrianopolis was an important religious center in ancient times. The pendant is now in his lab, and he will eventually hand it over to a museum to exhibit. Okay, and we are done for tonight. I just want to say thanks to the audience for sticking with us. It was a decent number of people sticking with us live, especially when it comes to some fringe topics like this one. Not all religious people like these topics, and I understand it, but one of many purposes of this channel is to tell Christians, hey, it's okay to use your brain for more than just the Bible in your church life or devotionals. It's okay to study and read other things, and let's try to find common things. Let's try to explain these things through biblical lenses, so you don't have to be afraid, hey, what about me going to library or on Amazon buying this? Or in this case, you don't have to buy anything. All the articles are available online, including the Testament of Solomon, which is a whole book, 130 chapters. So I hope that through Shaun and me, more through Shaun, you guys were able to get your answers, explanations. You don't have to be scared or concerned, and also learn when it comes to another layer of our religious history. Solomon was written in this ancient testament, this ancient book that had this protected magic amulet given by God. We see his beginning as this ruler who was serving and loving God, and then downfall. And then we correlated that to the pendant, which is a 15th century old one found in Anatolia, Turkey, modern day Turkey. Back then it was Roman Empire, and how it was served. It was made and bought for the purposes of Christian soldiers feeling like God's presence and protection would be with them through this ancient ruler who was, at least to a certain time of his life, he was faithful to God. That being said, Sunday is another important episode. We'll be doing a sequel episode with Spencer Owen, a Christian psychologist and clinician. We'll be continue talking about this book, Between Pain and Grace, and we'll be talking how God is not impassionate God who is devoid of passions. He's the one who has passions, meaning he can suffer with us and be in the midst of our suffering as the one who cares. And so we'll be going a little bit against the classical theism, and that has to deal with systematic theology, which would explain and describe God as one who is without passions, because for them, if God has passions, then he is able to change or be affected by anything outside of him. So for classic theism, for classic theologians, that will supposedly portray God as having weaknesses and not being perfect. But no, we want to assess that and explain that God having this attribute of being able to suffer with us is not his weakness. It explains his compassionate nature, that as Jesus suffered, he can now correlate with all of our sufferings, which is biblical. So stay with us. I don't think it will be a long episode because Spencer usually likes to have up to hour and 30 minutes episode, but it will be a sequel to that episode. And before you watch it live Sunday, you can go and watch our previous episode with him. I hope this type of episodes, even though they're new on the channel, will continue eventually to be built up and made. Why? Well, because all of us are suffering in anyways. Christians, non-Christians, atheists, skeptics, doesn't matter. Older, younger, male, female, doesn't matter. All of us. So I want this material to be available for free for Christians and non-Christians, so that one day, by the grace of God, they can find this material, even if it's mere coincidence. And I don't want to believe in coincidence when it comes to this type. I want to believe that God will draw people to this material, not because of me, but because of how God will use this book written by two of my former Moody professors, and using Spencer's expertise to talk to that level of as a counseling, as a counselor, as a pastor, as a therapist, for all the people who are ashamed to go to therapy sessions, cannot afford them, or they may feel they're lonely, that no one cares about them, no one loves them. But God loves you. We on the podcast love you, even though we don't know you. And this is why we're making this material, so it will be available completely for free for all of you, so you can enjoy and hopefully get some healing and some assurance in your heart that through your midst and suffering, even though I don't have the answer, why is that happening? God is there, and He's not like doing like this, like the God of deism, being cold and not interested in your life, but He's the one who cares. I cannot explain His plans. I cannot explain why is He allowing some stuff. Only He can. But we want to continue making this material occasionally for the sake of everyone who's suffering. And again, all of us are suffering in this or that way. All of us have traumas, all of us have pain, all of us have whatever from childhood to this day. So thank you for subscribing. Please continue to do so. Please continue to share the material, our episodes and links to the social media and internet. Keep please spreading the word. I shall see you Sunday with Spencer. Shaun, any concluding thoughts for tonight?
Well, I think that you wrapped up the show very nicely. I would say anyone who's interested in Spencer stuff to go look him up on YouTube, Trauma Informed Church Kid. He also has a Facebook group, so you can go there. And the important question, the problem of pain, why do things happen to other people? I think Aslan said it best in C.S. Lewis's book. No one is told any story but their own, right? So we can't just surmise from all of these, particular details what kind of person God is. He's the kind of person He reveals, and He reveals to be a very close God, a very personal God, and a God who suffers with us, a God who carries our burdens. And so He's a God that we can trust. He's a God that we love, and He is a God who is our source of life and happiness. And so whatever you may be able to deduce from all of the particular details, that doesn't matter. God reveals who He is. All you can do is try to infer. He's giving you. That's who He is. So trust Him.
Thank you so much, Shaun. Shaun and I, and hopefully one more person, will be assessing next Friday evening, God willing, the wild theories and academic ignorance of Billy Carson, who's been for years deceiving people in his false expertise of knowing ancient documents, including the Bible. Well, because he's been debating a brilliant Christian apologist who disarmed Billy Carson with all this data and facts. Now these things are getting around online, thankfully, and we want to assess this because it hurts my heart and it upsets my mind to see online whenever Billy makes any video, hundreds of thousands of followers believe in his expertise, which he has no expertise at all. If you want to get to know his expertise, there are like few online classes he took, and now he's suddenly an expert. So we want to assess that because it's very important, because people will put trust in a certain person, like, oh, he or she's an authority in this field. But when that parade falls down, it's not us wanting to attack the person, us wanting to attack the whole that false image that someone portrays as being like an expert in a certain field, and by doing that, misleading gazillions of people, that they're following him, and including that, that would include also his understanding of the Bible, how the Bible supposedly took from so many ancient other, documents, and then this Christian apologist like, okay, name some, and he was, I think, comparing Bible with the New Edition. He said, okay, give me some parallels, and he was just able to mention one, and he got quiet. There are more stories coming like that, and I'm so glad that someone is finally exposing Billy Carson, because he does not deserve to have platform online, and it is my joy to speak the truth, but not to attack. We will not be attacking the person. We'll be attacking the false premises and all the deceit coming from that side. That being said, God bless you. Tune in, subscribe, keep telling other people about this humble ministry. And I'm excited with all of you to see how God is blessing this podcast and making it grow. Shaun, thank you. God bless you, and we will see you all soon.